All right, good evening, everyone. The day is Tuesday, February 19th, 2019. Live from City Hall, we are here at the Mayor and Commission of Athens-Clarke County's agenda-setting meeting. If business is not concluded by 8:15 p.m., there will be a 15-minute break. We'll have several opportunities for citizen input on the consent agenda, on old and new business, and then on zoning items, which is, again, a relatively new innovation here. We are first going to take citizen input on the consent agenda. If you wish to address the mayor and commission, you may approach the podium on items 1 through 7, and you'll have 3 minutes. The green light will be on when you begin. The yellow light will turn live when you have 30 seconds left, and when your time is up, it turns red. So anybody like to come address us on the consent agenda? Again, those are items 1 through 7.
Good evening, y'all. Jesse Houle, P.O. Box 445 here in Athens. I wanted to speak to y'all about number 5. Sorry, I'm a little sick. So the school resource officers, from what we could glean reading some of the documents online, are it's some kind of partnership with the Board of Education. And from what I've understood, there's a separate kind of like police either department or program that's managed by the Board of Education. And I guess what the first thing we're seeking clarity on is what that relationship looks like and how much of the budget and policing policy of the officers in our schools is overseen by this body versus the Board of Education. Because to the degree that it's the former, want to encourage everybody here to be very mindful of the school-to-prison pipeline, which is a cleverly coined phrase that's particularly relevant in Georgia, where we have the highest number of people wrapped up in the criminal justice system of any state in this country, which has the highest number of people wrapped up in such a system of any country in the world. So not knowing the exact specifics of how that plays out, I guess tonight it's mostly asking for some clarity, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that there aren't armed officers in our schools ready to chain and haul off children into kid-friendly cages, which I'm assuming is also what you all don't want. So, thank you.
All right. Any other comments this evening on the consent agenda, items number 1 through 7?
Hi, my name is Rochelle. My address is 325 Harris Street. I'm here to talk about the same issue. I just want to know what is the justification for having school resource officers, what their role is in the school, and do we have data to show that we're getting what we say we want from them for being in the school? Because I'm also worried about the school-to-prison pipeline, how minor infractions in school can lead to criminalization for things that would have meant suspension or a cool-out time, and if we should be thinking about if we should be using this money for psychologists and counselors and social workers instead of police officers who could do a better job at counseling. Thank you.
Thank you. Rochelle, tell me your last name again. I apologize.
Berry, B-E-R-R-Y.
Okay. Any other comments about the consent agenda, items number 1 through 7? All right. Hearing none, I'd like to ask the commission, is there any item you'd like to remove from the consent agenda? I see Commissioner Wright.
Yeah, and after I make my comments, we'll be able to put them back on there. 2, 3, 5, please.
Okay. Commissioner Link?
Number 7, please.
Any other items that commissioners would like to remove from the consent agenda? Commissioner Edwards?
Number 6.
There we go.
All right. 2 left standing, friends. Any other items that any commissioner would like to remove from the decimated consent agenda? All right. All right. We're going to go ahead and have commissioner questions on the consent agenda, then we'll move on to, or the former consent agenda items, having already gotten some citizen input on those items, then we'll move on to citizen input on what on the agenda is listed as old and new business. So Commissioner Wright, you asked that number 2, which is the Milledge Avenue Extension parking prohibitions be removed.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank staff for going out there and evaluating that long stretch, that road. It says it's going to be yellow curb, but one side of it doesn't even have a curb, so they'll be putting the signs up for that. But a lot of the apartment complexes on South Milledge, their dumpsters are on that back side. So now the vehicles that need to empty those dumpsters can do that without cars parking around. They've started putting up cones to try to have no parking, and it's very narrow down there, and a lot of, I think 75 UGA bus trips are made back that way, so that's also going to be safer. And I really appreciate how fast they went out and evaluated that. So I wanted to just thank them, and it can go back on consent.
Any other commissioner input on item number 2 before it goes back on the consent agenda for our voting meeting of March 6th? All right, number 2 is back on consent. We're winning so far. Commissioner Wright, I believe you asked for
Yep.
number 3 to be removed as well.
Back to more parking in my district. Cars Hill's been evaluated, as you know.
That's
Mr.
number 4.
Oh.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Was it 4 that you intended to remove?
Four.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted 3 removed as
Okay,
well.
and Link asked for 3.
Sorry, I
Apologize,
might have
Allison.
said-
Do you mind if we
Yeah.
move on to 3 first?
Not at all.
Commissioner Link, go right ahead with number 3.
I just want to say that there's been a chorus of hallelujahs from Boulevard about the prospects of always stop there at Boulevard and Barber. There's some questions about whether or not the turning lane is necessary once there's a stop there. There's some fear that if there's a stop sign there, you might still get people blowing through it. That it just might not be necessary for that weird little narrow turning lane. So I do have some questions for staff about that. But yeah, we're very much looking forward to seeing this. It's going to make it much safer. It's pretty sketchy to cross right there now and to even turn in a car. So I'm happy to put that back on consent.
Do you want to communicate with Manager Williams about some of those
Yeah,
stop
I mean,
sign questions?
do you have any input on the turn lane issue?
I don't have anything to share right now, but I'll consult with staff to see about that configuration.
Okay, maybe we should leave it off consent just for the moment, and I'll get some clarification.
Any other thoughts about item number 3, the Barber Boulevard 4-way stop proposal? I'll share that I think my neighbors who live very close by and myself, will benefit from this, much as the kind of nearby intersection of Cleveland and College was significantly improved when that 4-way stop went in, given the sight lines there. And apologize about this earlier, Commissioner Wright. We'll move back to item number 4, which is another set of parking prohibitions here in Cars Hill on Oconee Street.
Right. And Mr. Mayor, you've been involved in a lengthy discussion from the few owner-occupied residents there as well. And I also wanted to thank staff on their thoroughness with that whole area, not just doing the one street. When I started off asking about Georgia Avenue, they did a really comprehensive evaluation, also improving or eliminating the left turn and the accidents that was coming from that. And another concern from these citizens was the change that's about to happen because of the Oconee Street School. We've already approved the plans for that, and while I have time, I wanted to say that I just got a letter that confirms that is now on the National Register of Historic Places, that application process was positive, and the property owner had sought that application out. I got the superintendent to write a letter of support as well. And again, just some more protections for that area that's about to have a historic renovation. And that can go back on consent.
That's great, Commissioner Wright. Thank you. Folks who were here a little more than 12 years ago might remember that building could have seen a wrecking ball at that point, and so it's good to see a great resolution with that property. So item number 4 is going back on consent. All right, and I believe, Commissioner Wright, you also asked for removal of item number 5, the school resource officer question.
Yes, and I can share a little bit about some of the questions that came for the school resource officers. They are a very critical part of the school community. Ovita and I have had many times with the improvements that were made with that and increasing that. And part of the beauty of having them as a staple on the school property is that they get to know the students. And then when there are times when the community needs extra police officers, if it's a youth event, whenever Cedar Shoals is playing Clark Central, all the resource officers are there, and they're familiar with the students because of that camaraderie that they have. And not many people know that the school district has its own police department. So that's another element of working with youth. But the SROs are specifically a contract so that they can be counted on site and have that continuity of care, so to speak. I can remember that my son, in his first year at UGA, went, and I guess one of the SROs was downtown working one of the games. He went running up to this police officer, and his friends were like, "What are you doing?" And it was just giving his SRO from middle school a big hug. So I think that their camaraderie with working with the youth has been a positive, and why that is also longstanding for that contract to be done. And I can tell you that even just the vehicle in front of the school is a security element in itself. I don't know if you guys remember, there was one time at one of our middle schools, and the gentleman, the SRO, was out sick, and that was when an intruder came in, and it was an assault on a young lady in the bathroom. So just the mere presence of that vehicle is a security feature as well.
Commissioner Neesmith?
And that can go back on consent as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, I want to add a little more information about the SROs because in our agenda meeting this week, some of those questions came up. And the fact is that the SRO, the Athens-Clarke County Police Officer, reports to his supervisor on the Athens-Clarke County Police Department. In fact, some of this contract includes some of the salary for the SRO's supervisor. I do think it would be interesting to see some data. I'm not sure exactly, we could brainstorm what kind of data we want to see. I think that it's important, and it needs to be emphasized that an SRO certainly needs to have the training to be a counselor, not just a law enforcement officer. And what would be interesting is, how many arrests does an officer make at a school, and for what? I would hope that his primary purpose is to prevent arrests, prevent harm by his mere presence, and of course by his force if he needs to use it, whether it's just an arm or something stronger. So I think it would be interesting to look closer at some data, and I would have to brainstorm what that data is. But I appreciate those questions, Ms. Berry.
Commissioner Denson?
I just have a couple of questions. I mean, I was looking through this, and the program was put in place in '96, I see, and as we all know, since '96, the needs and safety for schools has definitely drastically changed. And so with that, and we can, there's plenty of research that's been shown, like one of the things that's really needed here is more counseling, therapy, those kind of needs for the schools. So I do wonder if, since the county pays in $100,000 to this program, if there is any contribution more towards a therapy, counseling kind of idea. And I see what Commissioner Neesmith is saying, with some of these people are supposed to be trained in those regards also. I'd be curious to know exactly what that is. Also, I would love to see that if staff could show that to us. And do we contribute any money more directly towards therapy, counseling in a direct kind of way with Clarke County School District?
No, the purpose of the SROs are to provide a safe and secure environment. The school district staff, I think they have a social worker, they have counselors that fulfill those types of those roles. Now, certainly, the officers are there to understand and know the kids, what their needs are, establish relationships, create some trust between that age group and the police, as well as to provide the, sort of the secure surfaces that the school district obviously desires.
Commissioner Park, go ahead.
I guess on that, and I understand that, but I mean, the school district also already has their own police force too, so we're doing this kind of in conjunction with that and in addition to it. So I could see how we could do in addition to the therapy and counseling that's being provided, have portion of this money going towards something like that more explicitly.
I think the reason why, one of the reasons why the school district doesn't have their own officers is that they don't have a need for them in the summer. And so this is more efficient. We get these officers to help with some of our community outreach in the summertime. They only have to pay for 3/4 of a year for officers instead of having year-round financial obligation. I think that's the basis for the partnership.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To add to what Commissioner Denson was saying, I think that we can help create safe and healthy school environments, much like this program does, through other means, like Commissioner Denson was saying, through having a presence of more counselors, more social workers, more kinds of people in the schools that are helping support people stay on track and stay out of trouble, or intervene when things go wrong. There's a variety of different kinds of professions that provide that sort of care. And I was wondering if the unified government has ever partnered with the school district to help provide additional support staff in that way in its history.
Well, the school district, of course, is a separate governmental entity
Right.
governed by their own board. They've never sought that type of assistance from us. This was, for the last 23 years, been a mutually symbiotic relationship where we provide a service, and then, so beyond that, no, not to my knowledge. And some of the other commissioners have been here much longer than me, so I can defer to them too.
Could we be proactive in doing so in the future, in the upcoming budget cycle, perhaps?
I'll note a couple things, just
Sure.
given my experience, 17 years in the Clarke County School District, and then 4 years subsequent, kind of as a partner entity with them through Foothills Charter High School. The school district employs some full-time school resource officers through the Clarke County School District Police Department. Many school districts have their own police department. That's just kind of a part of their prospective operation. Gwinnett County has a Gwinnett County School System Police Department, just like there's a separate Gwinnett County unit housed in the Gwinnett County government. And so some of those are year-round, given that there are some 365 security needs in the school district, and then some, as Manager Williams referenced, that are just 9-month needs. In terms of some of the functionality of those officers, there really is a lot of informal and supportive interaction kind of in the hallways between the officers and the students. I mean, you do see officers really taking on a mentoring role, and in fact, in my last job, there were some officers who became formal mentors to students, and that was just part of their weekly expectation, is that they were going to follow up on about half a dozen students each. And so I think that social emotional work becomes part and parcel of their work. I would also note that that we do, of course, through our independent agency budget, fund Advantage Behavioral Health Services, and Advantage has personnel assigned to each of the high schools and the middle schools here in Clarke County. And so indirectly, we are supporting some of that kind of work. And I'll give a lot of credit to the Clarke County School District comparative to a lot of other comparably situated districts I've worked with. So one of the districts in which I was a partner for the last 4 years is about the same size in terms of student population, but they had about a quarter of the number of social workers in the district versus the Clarke County School District. Much of those are locally funded. So school districts fund the bulk of their staffing through what's called QBE, which is a funding formula that runs through the state. There's essentially a minimum staffing requirement through QBE, and the Clarke County School District supplements that with a lot of local dollars, and that's true in the areas of social work and counseling.
Thank
I
you.
hope that helps a little bit.
I wanted to
ahead.
ask one more question. So the language in the agenda item under facts and issues number 2, the ACCPD SRO program benefits, SROs are first and foremost law officers and are familiar with the problem areas of their respective campuses and surrounding geography. So are we talking about geographical problem areas like a door that kids sneak out of school in, or are we talking about problem areas like children, students as being areas of issue, of being problems?
Well, I take it to read that they know the campus,
Yeah.
blueprint, mentally, and if anything were to happen, they know how to transit it, as opposed to a zone officer that might roll up on a situation and not know exactly where the exits are and all that type of thing. That's the way I interpret it.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
In my experience, when I managed 3 of the buildings at the H.T. Edwards campus, part of the officers' daily responsibility was really being aware of the perimeter and kind of knowing that, just like in any public space, a lot of people come and go. And so if I had to sort of account for all of the crisis incidents that I ever was around or part of, a few of those originated from students, but some of those originated from the outside. I think kind of like the incident that Commissioner Wright shared that was at one of our middle schools. And so I was always grateful for that officer there, given that you might have people coming from off campus who might not be up to everything that you would hope for our students.
And lastly, I'm very sorry, but I would like to keep this off the consent agenda if possible, since there's been a lot of discussion around it. So maybe some of the questions we've asked, we can continue discussion on them at the voting meeting.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, in a couple weeks, we're having a work session on criminal justice, and so I hope maybe some of the issues that we brought up here we can discuss. I would like to see some statistics on how many students do end up under arrest, by school resource officers, and, what are those problems, and I would like us to discuss a partnership, a greater partnership with CCSD, in preventative measures. A lot of these kids, the only real structure they have is during those hours that they're at school, and not every school has after-school programs. I wonder if perhaps, our Leisure Services Department could step up and partner with the school district and UGA and address, those after-school needs that could stave off some of those problems that might have a kid end up needing the attention of a school resource officer. So, I don't know, just thinking forward to that work session and that school-to-prison pipeline issue.
I've got a few commissioner comments, but pertinent to Commissioner Link's question, Manager Williams, could you talk a little bit about the ongoing partnership of Grand Slam, which we dedicated tens of thousands of dollars to in our last budget?
Sure. Well, first off, Leisure Services has been working with the school district to talk about how we might help them at some of the schools, pilot at least one school that we could help, work with them to provide services to those kids. As far as Grand Slam, that's in the planning stages now. That's planned for the summer. It will be scaled to perhaps a couple of hundred students this first year. We're still, trying to nail down a location. So staff is working through that. Once we know the location, then the programming can be, a finer point put on programming, because some of that would be location specific as well. So all of that's in the works and more to come on that.
Okay. Thanks, Manager Williams. Commissioner Thornton?
I was going to say, I do think data is really important, and we do programs, we put SROs in school, but we are not following data on making changes. I remember when we had a truancy officer, just worked on truancy, saw kids on the street and picked them up. I know because my son was that truancy officer. And we did away with that. And then we went to, one time, we had the metal detectors at the alternative school that you had to go through. So there's been an evolution of what our police officers have done, but there is not no data to say it's the right thing to do. I definitely know some of the SRO, they're more than a police officer in some cases. They are mentors in some of these schools. And there are some and they've been families for some of these kids that don't have that support at home. But I do agree, I think the data is important. I do think that we should make sure that our SROs are trained. I think we do a lot better than a lot of other districts after being on the school district for 16 years. Now, I'm going to say this, and it's not going to go well with some folk. That youth task force we had, I'm still struggling trying to figure out what that was all about. I don't know what the function was. I don't know how it benefited kids in schools. It just seemed to be a big meeting to talk about a problem with no real solutions, which was led but one of the key players was the police department. Now, I may be totally off track on that one, and someone can correct me later, but I am not for supporting programs and positions that does not have a goal or a landing spot. I don't want to hear no more about processes. We're going through a process. You need to have a landing spot. You need to have a milestone. You need to know if you're progressing. So right now, I support the SROs. I think, though, I could support it even more so because you need data and you need personal testimonies of how they do help from the kids. So while I don't have no problem taking it off the consent agenda, but we really need a real partnership with the school district for the questions and some of the concerns that I've heard from the audience.
Commissioner Herod, did you raise your hand?
I just had a quick question. So I've noticed on here that it says ACC Gov's contribution is $100,000, and it says here, it says ACC Gov will pay salaries and travel costs for the selected officers during this training. I'm assuming that's what the $100,000 for, and I guess my question is, why are we paying that, and why is the school board not paying it?
Because we have the officers in the summertime. And so
Okay.
we use them for, the police, they have a summer camp as well. They do community outreach. And so, there are officers year-round, but they're dedicated to the schools for the 179-day school year. And then in the summertime, we pay the salaries because the school's not using them.
But okay, so I can pay the salaries bit, but the travel costs for going to the training.
Well, the training, this was negotiated some time ago. I mean, they pay for the uniforms, which, we use in the off-season, and related police equipment. So I think it's just sort of divvying up the cost for both of them. We could go to a pro rata, I guess, but that's kind of getting down to the finer points.
Commissioner Neesmith?
I just want to make a comment about the need for counselors and social workers. The University of Georgia has schools of social work and education, and they're training counselors and social workers. So it seems to me that if there was a partnership, that UGA could expand its partnership with the Clarke County School District and perhaps use it as a training ground that had actual benefits to the students as well. I don't think it's our role to do that. We don't employ those kind of people, but UGA is training them.
Commissioner Wright?
Yeah. Getting back to Commissioner Parker's comment on that number 2, I'll work with you on a commission-defined option because I've got some terminology I think can help define that so it's clear what we're talking about there. A lot of it's like traffic flow during class breaks. It's more so it's clear and nobody else reads it and needs that clarity. We might can clear that up if you want to team up with me and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. As a literacy educator, I find a lot of deficit language about kids often, and I'm constantly on the lookout to make sure we're talking about schools in like a positive way.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'd be happy to work with you to make that
because
work.
I'm
there.
on the Citizens Oversight for STOP, and a lot of the things that I learn about are with the renovations and improvements in the security changes, the interest security vestibule that we have in all the schools, and I can maybe, I can learn how it's said better, and I can give you some of the terminology that they're using for that, and then we can clarify that sentence in number 2.
Wonderful.
Okay.
And Commissioner Denson?
Yeah, just building on what Commissioner Link and Thornton said already, I think this is another great example of why I'd love to see the Mayor Commission having regular meetings with the Clarke County School District School Board. I think there's a lot of issues that come up like this where we need to have more clear communication. I think if we were able to sit down every semester with them, at least every year, to discuss things like this, I think we'd actually be improving on these quite a bit. And I've actually spoken to a number of the school board members who have brought up the exact same want that they want to be meeting with us. So I'd love to see if we could actually make that happen.
I think that's likely to happen. Commissioner Thornton?
And again, it's I guess because I've just gotten older, my patience is really short. But we used to do that. We used to meet with the commissioners. It was kind of sanitized, but we did meet. And I think when we're talking about things that are collaborative, common sense would almost say you would do it. I don't know what happened to those meetings. We went from school to school, or and just had, like I said, they were a little sanitized. They weren't very, but we were doing it. So I would love for us to get back to those kind of conversations, so we're not kind of put on the spot. Because even when some of the speakers spoke, I'm wondering, okay, are they going to go to the school board and ask those questions too? But they shouldn't have to if we're all talking together.
On the administrative front, Manager Williams, I know you meet very regularly with your counterpart in the Clarke County School District to discuss an array of community needs. I don't know if you want to make mention of that.
Sure. Meet monthly. We have breakfast along with the UGA representative and the chamber director, just to talk about what's going on in our respective worlds and making sure that we're staying in communication and building the relationship.
Okay, great.
Obviously doesn't take the place of what Commissioner Thornton was suggesting.
So we're going to leave this one off agenda, number 5 off agenda. All right, everybody ready to move on to item number 6?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Since you have a regular meeting with the parties you mentioned, could you thrust that out, that this would be something we would like to happen?
To meet with them?
Yeah.
Yes. If that's the will of the group.
Absolutely. All right. We're going to move on to item number 6, the lease agreement with the Smokers Den for retail use at 289 College Avenue. And Commissioner Edwards asked for some opportunity to comment about this item.
This is an issue that's sort of been concerning me for some years now, and it's the fumes and odors of tar and smoke that have permeated into the parking services office adjacent to the Smoker's Den. And I'd like to thank Manager Williams and staff, David Fluck, for responding to some concerns I raised regarding these workplace safety issues, is how I view them, by installing a filter in the HVAC system of our parking services office. But I've visited subsequent to that installation, and I'm still troubled by the tar and the smoke odor, and knowing that we have great employees that work there every day and are subjected to that harmful air, it troubles me. And I know that the proprietor of this business has written a letter to Central Services saying that they would explore more strategies to minimize the odors, the harmful smells. And I'm looking at the lease in paragraph 6. It says that the lessee agrees not to permit any offending odors from emanating outside the premises. The fact that these odors have existed for some years now, and the county had to act to install a filter in our own facility, and to my nose, the odors still exist, and I have communicated these concerns to some of my colleagues. And if for those who haven't had a chance to visit this office, I would encourage you to do so. I would like to see this lease be extended for 1 year. I'm a little hesitant to go into another 2-year lease. I would like this to be a 1-year lease, with the hope that the proprietor of Modern Age would continue to implement strategies to create a more safe working environment for our parking staff. Yes.
Oh, please.
That's it.
Please finish.
That's it.
Just before we move on to Commissioner Neesmith, Manager Williams, are we in a position, or Attorney Berryman, where this lease could be modified to include some other elements or shorten the term?
Well, it's a new lease, so you could change the terms of the lease, certainly. And there's also a 90-day out for either party in this lease as well, just as a backstop.
Okay. Commissioner Neesmith.
Well, I would say if odors are escaping from that space, and there's a firewall, I believe, between that space and parking services, it's not just it's a brick wall, it's a concrete wall. Then I think it's on us to seal up that wall. I mean, I've seen this happen before, and it required plugging up where pipes or wires were passing through the concrete block from one side to the other. There's a false ceiling there, I believe. Yes, I've been in the smoker's den. I believe there's a false ceiling there, so we might have to put some kind of material to block the two spaces apart. But I would say that if we're going to lease to establishments where people are smoking, then the onus might be on us to protect our employees that are in an adjacent structure. And it is our building. So I think we need to look at that and perhaps take some responsibility to fix the problem ourselves.
Commissioner Thornton.
I was one of the colleagues that Commissioner Edwards called about, and I did go down there, and the ladies all said it was 60% better, but even after leaving work or coming in, they would always have to shower if they were going somewhere else because of the smoke odor. She says it's worse on the weekends or when the business is really occupied. The other thing I was hoping that Commissioner Edwards brought up was, and I don't understand that, but she said they're really having bug issues very, very badly. Matter of fact, she said, you don't want to go back there because something may fall on you. And so I don't we spray and stuff our buildings? She said she's put in work orders and they have not been followed. So there are two issues at this building that I think our employees should not have to, I don't even think that takes an agenda mover item. We just need to make sure we get somebody over there and at least take care of that immediately.
Manager Williams, could you have Central Services check on that question?
It's an embarrassing moment, but we were talking about the building, so I just thought I'd bring it up.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like for some kind of response at some point, not tonight, about where our responsibility should go as far as the smoke issues. I don't want to just leave it laying there.
Well, let me say this. We did look for some indoor air, any type of regulations governing that, and the EPA does not have that. Saying what our responsibility in the absence of those types of regulations, we can't say that we are or we aren't. We don't have data that says either way. It's hard to prove. We can certainly see what steps we can do to improve, to your point, and hopefully the Smoker's Den, I think Commissioner Edwards, they said they were going to some conference that they were going to talk about strategies to try to lessen that. We'll see what they come back with as well.
I'm not optimistic that anything constructive will come back from that conference. As I said, and I don't care about EPA regulations, we have employees that are complaining about smoke odors. It's our building. Now, if we choose not to let a Smoker's Den type of business in that space, that's one thing. But if we expect that leaser to correct the problem, I think we're smoking something. We need to take responsibility for the problem ourselves. It's not going to get fixed by them.
Well, and
Commissioner Edwards.
with that in mind, due to the gravity of this issue, I will move that this lease be for a term of 1 year. I will be moving.
Future.
Yes. So the hope being that it gets fixed, either us or them. We create a safer work environment for our employees.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, we're going to move on to item number 7, slightly cleaner, healthier question of the Community Tree Council appointments. And I believe Commissioner Link asked for this to be removed from the consent agenda.
Yeah, I just wanted to make some comments. Speaking of research and clean air, recent research has revealed that there are about 3 trillion trees on the planet right now, and if we were to plant about 1 trillion more, we could reverse about 10 years of human-caused climate change. So I'm really glad to see this committee back up and running, and I see that there are many more vacancies, so I hope that we'll get a lot more folks on it as well, and that we can start doing some real work restoring our tree canopy. I mean, we've had a lot of storms in recent years, and trees are down all over the place. I know in my neighborhood, I mean, one took out my carport last year. So yeah, and educating our citizens and private property owners on appropriate trees in certain environments. I was down in Southwest Georgia this weekend and saw the destruction from Hurricane Michael, and just hundreds and thousands of acres of ancient trees just snapped and tumbled and rotting, and all the methane and carbon that's going to be pouring into the atmosphere from those lost trees and not being reclaimed. I feel like we have a special duty to really up our game and talk about street trees and getting more trees planted on public property, and educating our private property owners to plant more trees. So hopefully this committee can be a vehicle for doing that. And with that said, I'm happy to see it go back on consent.
Any other questions about the Community Tree Council? All right, just a quick note, Commissioner Edwards has kindly offered and accepted the opportunity to be our liaison to the Community Tree Council. I'd also make the note that Andrew Saunders mentioned to me in the last couple of months that, based on contemporary aerial photography, we have one of the most dense tree canopies in the region. But of course, there is always more work to do, so that work proceeds. So number 7 will go back on the consent agenda. All right, I'm going to move on to what on the agenda was listed as new business, and I'm going to ask for any citizen input on new business, which are items number 8 through 15. Items number 8 through 15. Again, your name, address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Chris Dowd. I live at 188 Northview Drive. And I want to speak to item 11, the transit agreement. So I'm glad that I ran into Director McDuffie out in the hallway, and he explained some of the issues I had with it, because I never really liked that inter-campus trip thing. I still think it's an agreement that does benefit UGA probably more than it does us, but it sounds like it's getting better and it's improving. So I definitely think it should pass at this point. Although and one part of it, it talked about how Uber was sort of taking some of the rides that probably used to go to Athens Transit. So I do think that looking at taxing Uber at this point is probably appropriate, maybe a small fee on there, I think would be a good idea. All right, that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Mr. Dowd. Any other comments from the audience on items number 8 through 15?
Hi, I'm Chris Creedon, I live at 265 Tall Pine Lane. I actually wasn't sure if this item counted as something I could speak about, so I wanted to talk about the Athens Cultural Affairs Commission and the Hot Corner mural.
So we don't have those on this agenda. At the conclusion of our voting meeting, March 6th, we have a general input opportunity.
Okay, I will try back then. Thank you.
Any other citizen input on items number 8 through 15?
Hello again. Man, sorry that my voice and probably demeanor is awful tonight. Jesse Houle, 145 Three Oaks Drive in Athens. I wanted to speak to you all about number 12. And first, thank you very much for the illuminating and detailed discussion around number 5. I think that these meetings are among the best places, probably the best place, to have discussions around things that are of concern to the public. And I think everyone behind the rail here is pretty aware that there's a lot of public interest and concern around policing. There's a lot of things that have happened over the last year, incidents between officers and members of the public that have involved violence enacted on people in unwarranted ways, as well as the situation with the chief being fired. And so, you know, when the vision around what policing should look like in this community is moved forward in the way that I know a lot of you campaigned on and have talked about publicly since, and even here in these meetings, I think it's really important to open up, whenever there's an opportunity, the discussion around what's currently happening with the police, with as much transparency as possible. And so that's where I wanted to speak kind of on 2 things. The first is, I'm curious if this STOP VAWA, I guess we'll call it, grant is like the JAG grant in terms of timeline. I'm not sure if it is, but I know that JAG grant that just came up last month is that situation where it's applied for by staff, and then essentially y'all are asked to rubber stamp it after the fact. And what that doesn't give you all a chance to do is look at what you'll actually be getting money that's earmarked in specific ways for. And so I think for transparency to be meaningful, it needs to be part of a process that happens with sufficient time, which includes not only, I'm sorry, I'm coughing so much, y'all. Not only making sure that y'all get a chance to review it before the application is submitted to see what's in it, but with enough time to really get input from the public, or at least ask the questions you need to as our representatives of staff. And then I want to talk a bit about transparency in general. For this specifically, there's a lot of value in the details of these things because it adds up over time. 17% of our budget, as you all know, goes to police, 20% to courts, which are very related to what the police do. So that's where they send people that they arrest, and 3% to the prison. And I'm not sure if jail falls under that or not too, but of course the prison is where we rely on unpaid labor of incarcerated people, which I know some of you want to change, which is great. But when we end that, which sounds encouraging, I think we need to be rethinking policing holistically, which means examining where the money goes in these grants, because it sets up a lot of inertia. You know, a vehicle now becomes insurance later, guns now, you know, you just need to justify using them somehow. And officers get hired and then become reliant upon that income, become a part of the community. So even though it's small, please share with us the details or at least look into them. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Houle. Any other public input on items number 8 through 15? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on to commissioner conversation, beginning with item number 8, the Oconee Rivers Greenway Project, and this is sub-project number 8, the MLK Greenway Extension Construction Contract Approval, and of course this is the segment between College Avenue and North Avenue along MLK. So, Commissioner Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Kurtz. Could you clarify for people who are maybe looking at this at home or in the audience, like what exactly this addenda item seeks to do? Because if you look at it, we are voting for a bid amount that is unspecified and a contractor that is unspecified. So that putting those pieces into context might be helpful for some.
If you look on your desk, you'll see that it is specified.
Oh, I have the oh gosh.
Well, and I would like to address Commissioner Parker's, because I think she's trying to clarify for the public. You know, on the one hand, we try to balance project delivery with timing, and you know, we meet once a month. Y'all vote once a month, and so this is a pretty common occurrence where the bid is going to actually happen within the lead up. So we typically have the work session. The bid is usually sometime close to that, and then you're given the information prior to the voting meeting, not at the last minute. And as you can see, those bids were open recently, and it's actually the bid came in at $650,850 to Georgia Development Partners, who have actually been doing some sidewalk work for us. And they gave us a very good bid. They were the low bid. It's a unit price bid. They're actually I think about $150,000 lower than we were expecting. So it's a good deal. It's about 0.6 of a mile along MLK, along the river. Typically, and it involves a small bridge over a tributary there. Typically, you can pay up to $1.5 million a mile, so this is coming in right at $1 million, pro rata. And so we're excited about this and to get this moving forward this year.
Great, thank you. And with that, I'd also like, oh wait, no, wrong meeting. No motion for approval yet.
No.
See you on the 6th. See you on the 6th.
No, I understand. I have
Oh,
great
I'd like to motion to put
enthusiasm
it on
for
the
this thing.
consent agenda.
All right, some interest in consent. Any other comment from commissioners about this segment that we've just gotten bids returned for? Commissioner Thornton first, and then Commissioner Neesmith.
Am I out of order? And if I am, just, Andy can just kick me.
Never do such a thing.
Yeah, when I say ouch. When we get bids like this, and we talked informally about minority set-asides, is this an example of where you could use minority set-aside? I'm just asking in general. We've been talking about it, and everybody, seemed to like the idea, but I've never seen the case or the situation where that would be used.
I'll say broadly, obviously, this is a public bid. Different communities do different things. Certainly a project that I do want to make people aware of is being routed right now through Envision Athens, and it is to build capacity in the contractor community. Kind of first with an emergent session that's happening 2 days from now on Thursday, and then with the plan for some separate minority contractor sessions. And generally speaking, those questions of either set-asides or preferences or capacity building, those are all budgetary and policy kinds of questions that we would want to talk about as a full body and have a policy or a protocol around. I don't know if Manager
I'm
Williams
okay
wants to
with
add a
that.
little
I
bit.
just don't want our conversations to just go limp. And when we have the opportunity, and like I said, this may not even be the opportunity. That's what I'm just, this may not even be it, but I'm just trying to figure out what it is since we're building stuff and fixing stuff, and how does that work?
Well, I don't know what Georgia law does or doesn't allow. I haven't really researched that. We have a purchasing ordinance, and that is something that I think would need to be changed. So this is really a policy issue. And if it's something that the commissioners wanted to investigate further, certainly, that's.
Well, I would like to investigate it further.
Bill, do you want to go ahead and provide some context?
This issue has been brought up several times before, and there are kind of serious legal issues about local governments having minority programs. There are some federal contracts that Athens-Clarke County has that do require, under the federal regulations, some form of minority participation, but generally, the courts, the federal appellate courts, have found those to be unconstitutional. So you just have to be careful when you go about trying to establish them.
Isn't that something that they do in Atlanta, though?
It's been a while since I've looked at Atlanta's program. I'm
Well,
not sure that
I just would like, because it doesn't make no sense for us to keep talking about it if it's illegal or it's going to be a problem. But we've been talking, and so, but we haven't tested it.
I believe that Atlanta and other communities don't use minority programs. They use lower income. As
Call
the
it whatever
basis
you
for
like.
everything.
We just need to get that work pool where it needs to be. So you're gonna look into it. Or do I ask the mayor?
Well, I think we need to do a schedule on that, because we have lots of, especially with SPLOST going on right now, our staff is pretty overwhelmed by projects. We could probably work that into a plan, but it wouldn't be quick.
I'll note that the question obviously has come up a lot, and you see communities around the country doing different things. Some of the way that I think some of the Metro Atlanta programs are phrased is around targets, desired outcomes to kind of have greater minority participation. So in some of my conversations here, and I've been in the midst of a series of emails with people from SBDC as well as the UGA Law School. I think I'll be able to get a little bit of information that I could pass along just to create some baseline understanding of the current legal environment and what our prospects are. And then we could say, how do we want to position this for some committee work?
Could this be part of the GIC work to do that kind of research?
GIC is a little bit different because it's so micro-targeted on housing. But I think this is some corollary activity that we could look at.
Okay.
Commissioner Link?
One thing that I see an opportunity, we are in the midst of building miles and miles of new trail, and however that trail gets built, there are going to be some maintenance and monitoring needs for those trails. And I see a real opportunity here for some programming that can benefit our low-income and at-risk youth community. Some kind of youth trail ranger type program, much like the Land Trust has the Young Urban Farmers and the Young Urban Builders. So I think moving forward, as we start recognizing those maintenance needs, maybe that's where we can reach that community and benefit that community really tangibly.
Commissioner Wright?
I didn't know if we were to the point that this could go on consent.
Is it on already?
Commissioner Parker suggested this move to consent. Yeah. Everybody comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with it.
Okay. All right. So item number 8, Gene, is going to move to consent. Nice. We've traded out some consent for some non-consent. And in all items trail, we're moving on to number 9, which is the Firefly Trail Project and preliminary plans for the next segment that would take us from the current terminus out to, I believe, Hancock Lane. And so I'd be interested in kicking off comment for whoever would like to dive in.
This was just on work session. This is that section we just had in work session.
This was just on our work session agenda. That's right.
I say consent.
All right, everybody comfortable with number 9 moving to consent as well? All right, lots of love for the trails tonight. All right, let's see if we can go 3 for 3. Number 10 is the sidewalk gap projects on Southview, Baxter Street, and North Chase Street.
I hope that we can put this on consent. Just a little history was that there was money left over for sidewalks in between, before the bike ped master plan was finished. So this was a gap of money to address gaps in sidewalks, and we had criteria set up so it was less the original list that would be because so-and-so asked for it. This one had criteria, and the connectivity from one place to another is, these scored the highest. So these are the first 3, and there's another batch of 3 after these get done. But I'm happy to see this moving forward. It got stalled a little bit because of that GDOT money that came in. The staff that were moving this forward moved over so that we could claim that money in those sidewalks that I think was Atlanta Highway, and then Milledge at the Loop, and maybe another one. But anyway, that said, this is a great project and well done, and I'll be happy to put this on consent if everybody else appreciates that I've been watching this closely.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'm happy to put it on consent, too. I just want to point out that there's that section of North Chase Street that's going to be getting sidewalk, that east side of North Chase Street. And I know that's going to make a lot of folks in the Boulevard neighborhood happy because there is a lot more pedestrian activity with so much going on near Oneida there.
I hate to bring up the
Commissioner
point in here, the landlord of 4 of the houses would not come to agreement. So this is 2 of the 3. The staff, I forget what it's described in, let me see.
Wait, did I miss that?
I think so.
Yeah, you're being asked to, just approve the first 2 and not the third one. So we've got an unwilling property owner. The sidewalk benefits mostly that property, and so staff is just going to back away from it.
Okay.
I would note that I believe it is, in fact, the same landowner who we use some eminent domain for around the H.T. Edwards campus, and so commissioners may want to consider whether that's a route that they'd be interested in.
I would be interested.
Taking here, too.
Because I know that the community really needs that sidewalk.
Well, that could be a CDO, and then we would certainly follow that direction if approved.
So given the prospect of CDO, we'll leave this off consent. Any other comments or questions about item number 10? All right, moving on to 11. This is the FY20 Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County / UGA Transportation Agreement for Student, Faculty, and Staff Ridership on the ACC Transit System. And shock, Commissioner Denson.
Yeah, and this, speaking to the public comment we had from Mr. Dowd earlier, I mean, we are moving away from the inter-campus rate, which I think is definitely a good direction for us. My main thing that I would like for us to maybe look at, I know we have looked at it in the past, but is to see if we can come up with a negotiated discounted rate with Athens-Tech to be able to provide a similar program that we provide to UGA, where they're able to ride fare-free at that moment, and at a discounted rate. And I would love to see the Athens-Tech students be able to have a similar option.
Manager Williams, the umbrella under which the UGA agreement operates is one that could be extended to other public or private entities?
Sure, if they desired that.
Other questions or comments about item number 11? Anyone interested in seeing this go on consent?
Yes.
I would just make a comment. I don't think Athens Tech charges a transportation fee. So that would be something that would have to be overcome before we would probably enter into agreement with them, because they're probably not going to pay us anything unless their students are paying a transportation fee.
All right, move to consent?
Move to consent.
Okay, great. All right, Gene, number 11 is going to move to consent. All right, item number 12 is the 2019 STOP VAWA Grant for violence against women funding for ACCPD personnel.
Move to consent.
Commissioner Denson?
I just wanted to point out that at the last voting meeting, I brought up that asking that we could have the applications added to the end of the grants when we have these, and I saw that was done here, and I just want to thank staff for doing that. I think that definitely helps towards the transparency that was spoken about in public comment, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner Denson. And also, I want to appreciate, I want to thank you for your comments. And I have talked to staff about, these cycles and timing and the fact that y'all need to be let known what's going on. And so I think the way we're going to do that is, we talked about that today, is that, we'll get the basic information, what the grant is, what it's used for, how much it is, what our commitment is, what the timeline is, and when it will come before you. And I can just email that to y'all, and we can kind of compile that, so at least you're aware. And if you've got questions early on, we can address those.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Parker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep almost calling you Madam Mayor still. I'm getting used to it. But I also wanted to thank staff for helping increase in transparency with grant applications like these by including that information at the end, as well to speak to issues of transparency that were brought up in the public comment. Again, I'm looking forward to having a coordinating council working with the police department and other bodies to ensure that we're having a fullest input we can into processes like these, in addition to doing now to help everyone stay informed.
Everybody comfortable with 12 moving to consent? All right, 12 moves to consent. Gene? All right, item number 13 is execution of a memorandum of agreement with Princeton Place Apartments. And then for the public's knowledge, this concerns the development on Tallahassee Road, very near the soon-to-be-replaced Tallahassee Bridge. So any questions or comments from commissioners about this item? Commissioner Neesmith, I believe this is in your district.
No, actually, it's in Timston.
Wow.
So if he would like to go first, I would be happy with that.
Sure. I actually was able to meet with staff earlier today to kind of go over this in detail, and definitely appreciate staff being able to work out an agreement with Princeton Place, so that we're having part of that work being done in the right order, but also having help pay for it. And I think talking to staff, we've thought about trying to think ahead of the curve when we might have traffic issues coming up in the future when this is done. So we're trying to get ahead of that so that we can have those things kind of squared away before we run into those problems. So I think this is a good move, and also it's going to be bringing in housing that at a price point that we desperately need. we need some more affordable housing, so I'm excited to see that come to District 5.
Commissioner Neesmith, did you want to
Yeah,
follow up?
it is going to bring in about 950 beds, I believe. It's quite a large development. The traffic issues are already there. They're pretty bad at certain times of the day. So, yeah, we've got some thinking to do for that intersection on both sides of the loop. But I wanted the public to know, because this surprised everybody, frankly, because it was a bill by right. They didn't have to get any waivers or rezoning or anything to build these apartments. So they just pull building permits and they're moving right along. So it's too bad we didn't know about it, although, again, it was a bill by right. And to see a road pop up, a new road pop up and not know about it is really disconcerting. This agreement does align that road properly with the light, as I recall, and also finance part of the cost of improving the signalization there. So it's a good thing, but we're seeing a lot of growth. We're having the same thing on Atlanta Highway. There's a new apartment building, a complex being built that popped up all of a sudden. It's 875 beds. So we got a lot of growth going on the west side.
Would folks be happy to see this move to consent?
Sure.
Yeah, move to consent.
All right, Gene, number 13 is moving to consent as well. All right, we're going to take a look at item number 14, which is Phase 5 landfill construction. This is a budget amendment. And I believe you've got some new information that's at your desk, much as we did with the Greenway item. So any interest in conversation about item number 14 from commissioners?
I would just like to say that to our citizens that we don't like spending money on landfill. We don't like filling landfills up. So let's all be very, very aware of the opportunities to recycle and do that recycling. And don't forget our Center for Hard to Recycle Materials, the CHARM on College Avenue, where you can take television sets and styrofoam and just a lot of things that are going to end up in the landfill. And they can be reused and repurposed by going through the CHARM paint. It just hurts me to see what's going into the landfill, because when you go out there to take some stuff and you see what people are throwing in the landfill, it's very disturbing. A lot of styrofoam.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'd like to echo Commissioner Neesmith's comments, particularly about styrofoam. And I do hope that this commission can have further conversations about how we reduce the use of that material in this community. I know that Clarke County school districts serve every single meal to the children in this community on styrofoam, which not only contributes to our landfill, but there are toxins in that material that do leach into food. It's not healthy for growing children to be ingesting food that is in contact with styrofoam. And it's not healthy for adults either to be drinking and eating food off of styrofoam. Not to mention the greenhouse gases that go into the manufacturing of styrofoam, the toxins, the pollutants. Just the manufacturing of that product is not healthy for our environment and does not bode well for climate change issues. So I do hope that we can seriously have a discussion about what we can do to reduce the use of styrofoam in this community, whether it's a ban or a fee, or incentivizing local businesses to somehow eliminate the use of styrofoam in their takeout. So I look forward to that conversation happening soon.
Commissioner Thornton?
I would like to see, I just found out about CHARM last week at a meeting that I was at. I would like to see us publicize CHARM a little bit more, whether it's on our government TV channel or a little something that goes in the mail or something, because I think that is a resource. And I always feel as though we always talk about the challenges and the problems we face with anything, but not what we're actually are doing. We need to promote CHARM a little bit more. I am much more conscious about recycling than I have ever been since joining this commission, and I think it's important. I think the conversation about the school district, that would be one of those meetings that we need to be talking about when we meet with the school board on how we can help them recycle. So our meetings should not, with the school board or with any other entity, should not just be a meeting to be meeting, but with a clear goal of coming out with something. So that would be a good first meeting to talk about what we could do or help the school district in recycling.
And I believe I had Commissioner Davenport, and then I'll go to some others.
Yeah, I want to echo again the Smith and Link, but I also would like to include some of the apartment developments that we have in Athens-Clarke County that don't recycle, and working with the Athens Housing Authority to making sure that the residents of those complexes are recycling as well. This landfill is in District 1, and it is a blight, and it's unfortunate that it's expanding. I just think as a community we need to do every possible thing we can do to recycle and to compost. I do it at home. So maybe look at ways that we can educate the public on better ways to recycle, what can be recycled, and increasing composting throughout our community.
And I'll say that I know that Joe Dunlap, the recycling coordinator, and Suki Jansen, solid waste director, would be glad to talk about some of the things that they've already got underway and some of the things they anticipate in the years ahead. Commissioner Edwards?
Since we're talking about waste and litter in the landfill, I had a conversation with some folks from Central Service who were doing some road work on a stormwater drain in my neighborhood, and they let me know that the number one expense on our stormwater system and the number one problem that exists within our stormwater system is single-use plastic bags. So single-use plastic bags are a tremendous drain on taxpayer resources in this community. We are having to leverage our stormwater fees, raise stormwater fees to clean up these plastic bags. So I just wanted to highlight that issue that was brought to my attention from staff, the extreme expense that taxpayers have because of the use of those bags.
I think I had another interest from this side. Commissioner Denson?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. I think that's just important. A lot of times with our waste, and I agree with all the comments that have been made, but I want to really emphasize just reducing in general, consuming less. Definitely things that have the packaging, getting away from styrofoam. Those things are really important. And I think that a lot of times our issue with it as a society and definitely as just a community is that it's out of sight, out of mind. We throw this stuff in our garbage bin. It gets driven over to District 1 and thrown in the landfill, and we don't think about it. But this has so much cost. I mean, literal cost. It's $5 million to do this expansion, plus the environmental issues, the fact how it's affecting our waterways. Our solid waste department has done a great job when it comes to the marketing around trying to get people to recycle. I think we need to be putting more of an emphasis just on reducing in general, because we can't keep doing this forever. We can't keep expanding this landfill forever. So,
Commissioner Neesmith?
So while we're talking about throwing away things and expensive things, and even our school system, let's not forget disposable wipes. They're not flushable. And probably our biggest problem in our sewer systems, our sanitary sewer systems, are disposable wipes. And often they are collecting outside of school buildings and hospitals because we're providing those disposable wipes for people to use, and they don't understand they're not flushable. They go in the garbage can. They're made of plastic. They never fall apart. And they collect, and they cause big problems. It cost us a lot of money. So we're done with the preaching now, huh?
Any other commissioner comment? I'll note that I'll be putting together an ad hoc committee this spring to carve a path for us for elimination of the plastic bags and polystyrene containers that are petroleum-based. So we'll be looking for that in the weeks ahead. We're going to move on to, let me ask, item number 14, consent?
Yeah.
All right. Lots of healthy material conversation, but I think the substance of this, everybody knows we're moving forward with. All right, finally, item number 15, Downtown Transportation Improvements Program. We're talking about the public art recommendation for Clayton Street. Commissioner Link?
I will say that I've had some comments from the public and from folks in the arts community that express really serious concerns about the fact that these large commissions are not going to local artists. And you know, I sat on the Cultural Affairs Commission for a while, and I understand that there, you know, for some projects, it's really hard to limit the scope of who can apply for these projects. And I just would like to request that we give some direction to that commission, that they formulate their bids so that more local artists, more qualified local artists are able to apply. I know that, you know, there were a couple of bids that we put out there when I was on the commission where we limited the artists who could apply to Athens and the surrounding counties, or people who had a clear, could demonstrate a clear connection to our community. You know, it is a concern. I'm hearing a lot of negative feedback from the arts community about this public art program and how it's not necessarily benefiting what is a pretty thriving and fairly world-renowned arts community. You know, when there are some of these federal NEA dollars involved, I know that, you know, we can't limit the area from which the bids can come, but, you know, I feel like we should do that whenever possible, and you know, maybe design these RFPs and RFQs so that they are the most local artists can qualify for these projects. I mean, I was a bit confused by this project when I saw the bid go out. I thought what it was looking for was kind of a local curator who would be able to work with multiple local artists to kind of provide a cohesive art walk along this central corridor of our community. Apparently, that's not what they were looking for, and what we're getting is kind of a linear, conceptual, sculptural piece that weaves in and out of the streetscape. So I just want to put that out there. I know there are a lot of concerned members of the arts community, and I hope that we maybe can have a conversation with the Cultural Affairs Commission about how this local public art program can best benefit our local artists, and we do have lots and lots of local artists.
Commissioner Parker?
Thank you, Mayor Gertz. I first wanted to ask if, for clarification, whether in this particular project there were any funding restrictions on who they could get or decide bids for. Like, in terms of, like, who might they receive bids from or request bids from? Because as Commissioner Link mentioned, with, like, NEA grants and things like that, there are those kinds of restrictions. But I was wondering if in this case there was any reason why that could not have been the case, that they were looking specifically for local or giving some sort of local preference in the artist chosen.
My understanding is that, like most of their solicitations, it's open to anybody, and the committee kind of vets them on the merits of the proposal.
Okay.
The money comes from, of course, 1% of project costs. Nothing to say that it has to be one project. It could be several projects, but
there's no, like, state law or anything saying that in this particular instance they needed to, like, keep it like an open bid, not like nationally.
Bill, if they wanted to make it exclusively local, I don't think there's a law against that.
I don't think so. I mean, the definition of local can sometimes be difficult to pin down. But no, I don't think there's a restriction on it.
Okay. And it could just be that they need some direction, if that is the will of the commission, that we see more local preference in public art projects. We could make that happen. I know that with the Hot Corner mural, which I believe someone came to speak on, but this wasn't quite that time. I was really delighted to see that the artist was going to be working with local artists here in town to make it a collaborative process, particularly since it's like a historical mural. And I don't see why we couldn't create some sort of standard, a specification saying that one of the things we're looking for in our public artists is that they, if they are not from here, be willing to work with people who are, because it's really hard for people who don't have formal training or access to resources of other kinds to get their foot in the door for a lot of projects like these. And so this could be an opportunity for them to get that mentorship and training to then be competitive for things like our bus shelters and other projects as they come up. So my last question is, what would happen if we sent this back to the drawing board?
One thing I'd note is that we crafted a general agreement with the Cultural Affairs Commission a little over a year ago for all of the TSPLOST projects.
Got it.
One prospect is that we say for projects moving forward, we want to recraft that agreement. But again, we've already kind of provided some marching orders to the ACAC.
Okay.
And we may want to say that there may be something different we want to do with future projects. And so I'd submit that for your consideration.
Would that be something that could be a commission-defined option with approval of this project, or something need to go through a separate process to have that happen?
Bill, in terms of the scope of this agenda item, would you have some recommendations around that question?
Well, I think probably the only option would be to reject it and then start over. But then you do bring up the point of the agreement with ACAC for this whole TSPLOST project. That would probably have to be reworked. But I don't think there's anything you could do about this particular project and this agenda report other than just rejecting it and sending it back.
Which I don't necessarily want to do. I just want to know what our options are for like.
So, Bill, you're suggesting that for future projects, the 1% expenditure that we've often used in the SPLOST and TSPLOST packaging, we could approach ACAC and ask for some more localized criteria for the call for artists.
Yes, and I would think maybe it would be something like a scoring process where you would weight local art along with other factors. I mean, I think you might want to have a dialogue with ACAC about how to do that in a fair way, in a way that's the people who are making the proposals would understand what the criteria would be.
And just in general, from having interacted with them, and I'm sure Commissioner Link can confirm this, they'd probably be happy to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Commissioner Link, you want to follow up?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to propose, at least for this project, perhaps we can come up with a commission-defined option that maybe can require that this artist do some kind of workshop with local artists, or there is some kind of presentation opportunity where our local arts community can meet with this very accomplished public artist to understand his process and what the process is for becoming a public artist. And also, because this is a linear project down a streetscape, to assure that, and the final design has not been determined. This is very conceptual at this point. But from the concept, as best I can tell from the presentation materials, is that this sculptural bright blue tubing is going to weave in and out of the streetscape and kind of wrap around street furniture and stuff. I would propose that there just be a requirement that there remain some public spaces where there is still room for local public art. So the artscape down Clayton Street can kind of grow and change, and there's opportunity to possibly have art walks where sculptural pieces do change out, which is very common in other communities, and provide those ongoing opportunities.
I'd certainly be happy to engage with ACAC. Again, a sort of local artist workshop is outside the scope of the RFI that was responded to. And so we probably would want to have some informal conversation before we formalize something that an artist might not be able to avail himself to do. But I think the conversation would be good. And then from the conversation, we probably can figure out what a prospective commission-defined option could look like.
Yeah, I'd like to reach out to the ACAC. Perhaps Commissioner Parker and I can have a conversation.
Commissioner Denson?
Yeah, I wonder if we could take that a little bit further. I mean, I know we did talk about this a little bit at the work session, and I was able to talk to a few of the members of the ACAC last week further, and it sounded like there was definitely some interest on their side of working with a local artist in the way that the Morton Theater is also being done. So I wonder if we could if we could go back to them and talk about if there is a little bit of extra funding, or we could find some funding in this to draft a CDO that has some direction that says that we want to have a local artist be an apprentice on this project, because as far as I know, when I was going through the work session materials, it said that the one limitation they put in place is they wanted somebody who had experience working with municipalities doing public art of this size and caliber, and that blocked out a lot of our local artists. So let's solve that by having somebody, a local artist, apprentice with this artist so that they do have that experience. And I wonder if we could work with them and then bring a CDO at the voting session that gives some direction on actually having that position established as part of this. Is that possible?
I think anything's possible. This is really the commission. They're a child of this body, so I'm sure they would be glad to take direction from y'all.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and certainly set up a session. Commissioner Neesmith?
Well, I thought, Mr. Mayor, I thought they had issued an RFP and they've got their bids, they've selected their provider, and this is a contract, going to be a contract. So if we change any terms of the contract, then they have to go back and renegotiate with the bidder. This is a contract, it's not an ordinance. CDOs are for ordinances, not contracts, unless we want to throw it back and start over again. I don't think we want to do that. Maybe we do, but I don't think that's the intent that I heard. Am I wrong, Blaine? It's a contract, right?
Well, they would enter into a contract for there to be some additional design, and
That
then
would be a
return back-
modification to the contract.
and return back to y'all if you stayed with this concept. This is the approval of the concept.
So it's not a contract, it's an approval of the concept.
It's approval of a concept,
So I'm wrong.
but they will enter into some agreement with the artist to do some additional work for which they'll pay him
Okay, that's different.
to come back to you with some more specifics so you can decide if that's what you want.
All right. So Tim, I apologize. I think maybe you got something there.
One of our artist members of the commission has some thoughts. Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, I just got to say, when I put in the time for a request for a proposal and get picked, that it would really be crazy for them to call me back and saying, by the way, we have an assistant for you. I'm just saying that this sort of discussion is good, and the timing of it for this project, I think, is off. And I know that we all dress different, we all have different tastes in art that's hanging in our houses and stuff, but I think that this linear idea, and I think that the blue was just so that it could be seen in the picture, if I remember that correct from the work session. That's how conceptual this is a line down Clayton. We have a lot more street to cover with art and different projects. So to have this linear concept going in on both sides of Clayton for this project is what this is about. And to break it up and try to drop in something that might match or not match, Commissioner Link, when you were talking about, I think that in my mind, it would be more powerful for the art to not be in line with this for the other places that we can have art. I guess what I'm getting at, we have a lot of places that we can put a lot of art, and that if we would harness this idea and learn how to add that into how the proposals are put out, the RFP or the Q, whichever one this was, make sure it's in the beginning so that they know. And so if we could just maybe do all these great ideas on the next one, instead of trying to do it before we vote on this one where the person has already been picked. And like I said, when I get picked for a contract, it's a pretty happy moment and to do the project. And I just wonder about the consequences of interfering with what's been done already.
Commissioner Parker?
Thank you. It's not that I dislike the design at all. I actually think it's very cool, and can imagine it downtown really well, and feel very enthusiastic about it. But I do think that it's something that's going to be down there for a long time. And so whether or not the timing within this particular process is right, to me, isn't as important as thinking about the impact of its permanence within our public spaces downtown. And as well, the opportunity that might give someone locally to get to work with this particular artist in order to, as Commissioner Denson was saying, have the portfolio that they can show to someone in their own future RFPs and be able to get projects like that of that caliber. I also, I've experienced a lot of disappointment as an artist myself. I think that if this person, being an established artist, decides that they don't want to work with someone here locally, that's an option they're allowed to, choice they're allowed to make. And if, they feel like they want to walk away from this opportunity as a result of that, that's their welcome to do. But I think that we should put the idea out there because, we're disapproving concept design right now. Maybe they'd be amenable to work with someone beside them here locally as they put this very cool design into motion here in Athens. So I don't think there's any harm to having a conversation with ACAC about that possibility and seeing if they could just pitch that.
Commissioner Edwards?
My only concern with this discussion is where's the funding going to come from for the assistant?
Yeah. We don't want to have free.
Because up to this point, we've proceeded with an artist down this road through a selection process with an amount of money promised for work that this artist has created a concept for. And now at this point, I love the idea of an assistant, but let's figure out how we're going to pay for it. I know we have the money to pay an assistant. Just help explain to me, because I feel reluctant stripping off some of what has been published for this artist to apply for to pay for an assistant after he's gone this way. So I would like to see a new source of funds dedicated to pay for such an assistant, not to derive it from the initial proposal.
Commissioner Link?
I think, involving the local arts community in a project like this could be something as simple as a presentation or workshop that is open to local artists. And I'm also a bit confused about this concept. Are all these pieces of street furniture going to be designed by the artist as well? Or are from what I'm interpreting here is that this linear tube thing is going to simply kind of wrap around and engage with these pieces of street furniture and kind of define little small spaces along the way, which means if it can kind of wrap around and engage with street furniture, which is of all varieties of design, it could wrap around and engage with other art pieces. So I'm just kind of curious about the concept. I had a hard time kind of processing it when I first saw it, and then it was explained a little better at the work session, but I'm still not quite clear. Are the street furniture pieces going to be designed by this artist?
Well, my understanding is that that this will be certain things like trash can holders, bike racks. I think, I don't know if I saw a bench in there or not. Before this came about, I think the, our SPLOST project managers were planning on having separate street furniture. It really depends on what he comes back with. If he's going to provide some of that through his art, then there won't be a need to double up. I will say that, we don't, given the pedestrian nature of downtown, we don't need a lot of clutter on the sidewalks if we can help it. So we want to be as efficient as possible. But yes, my understanding, he will design, have it fabricated, and install it. And the total budget, I think, is like $50,000.
Yeah, that's a pretty low budget to include all the street furniture. So that's why I'm really confused about what the actual concept of this is.
So it sounds like there's some kind of specific interest in kind of pursuing some other elements that might include something like a workshop, and certainly some questions about kind of the nature of how the tubing becomes either a functional element or wraps around functional elements.
Well, I think that's the point of the next iteration, is that, we've got some conceptual ideas here. They wanted to know they were in the right ballpark, and now they'll go back to the artist and say, let's do a little more design here and be more specific about what we're talking about, and then come back to you on a work session so you can understand and ask those questions.
So there is that time to, we're offering our input on this very initial conceptual phase that they can then bring back to the artist so he can hopefully work that input into the final design, correct?
Yes.
This is the opportunity to have this conversation.
Yeah, we're a long ways from finishing the construction, but as we are entering our final design, it's good to coordinate whatever this is going to look like with the final design of the construction, so we know what we're getting.
Commissioner Parker.
Thank you. On the question of money, would it be possible to use like SPLOST funds from previous public art projects that was left over, if there are any?
I'm not sure there is, but if there was, it certainly could be reallocated for those purposes.
Okay, could you look into that for me?
All right, I will be in touch with the Cultural Affairs Commission, let them know that some commissioners would like to have a conversation and ask about some further elements of this. Does that sound good? That's right. All right, perfect. All right, so we're going to move into the planning and zoning phase of the meeting, so I'm going to relocate. Brad Griffin is going to come forward, the screen is going to come down, and I'll describe our, again, relatively infant public input process at agenda-setting meetings.
Oh, no, you're right.
Come on, man.
All right, again, Brad Griffin, our planning director, has joined us, and we have 3 planning items on the agenda tonight. He's going to give us a broad overview of the item, and then we're going to have an opportunity for some general public input of 3 minutes per provider, just as earlier. So Brad is going to kick us off with conversation about 715 and 717 Beaver Dam Road, which is a proposed single-family dwelling, a rezoning from the agricultural residential area.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Straight rezoning request here from AR to RS25 at 715 and 17 Beaver Dam Road. One parcel, about 1 3/4 acres, currently zoned AR. This is part of the larger property that you all looked at a month or 2 ago, where our comprehensive plan update kicked the land use classification back into rural. It has been single-family for 2 decades, since the original adoption back in '98. We put it back to single-family. What this one is really about is a piece of property that was inherited by a brother and sister several years ago. 2 houses on it. Brother got one, sister got one. Property's too small to subdivide, so they could each own one of the houses separately. It is compatible with an RS25 classification. You see the property here on the north side of Beaver Dam Road. The third structure to the right and a little bit back is a garage. There's some RS25 zoning across the street. You see aerial here. But you can see from a lotting pattern, AR zoning, 10-acre minimum. If this property is 1 3/4 acres, there's really nothing in this area that's anywhere near the 10-acre minimum lot size currently. Those are the 2 houses. You see to the left and across Beaver Dam down in the corner, single-family residential down there as well as some RS25 zoning in Weatherly Woods. Really what this is about is they're asking to change the designation to another designation also compatible with future land use. It actually takes away a few otherwise permitted uses under AR in terms of intensity of agriculture, in terms of some limited commercial ability that they have currently that they would not have under RS25, and it is limited only to the ability under RS25 to subdivide one time. Property's not wide enough or large enough to do more than the 2 lots, one for each of the 2 houses. So with that, the Planning Commission recommendation was to approve simply with the condition that the subdivision of the property and recording has to take place upon adoption.
All right, any members of the audience like to come say a few words? You have up to 3 minutes. None on this item. I believe this is in Commissioner Davenport's district, so you get to kick off our conversation.
Yes, this is literally simply straight rezone, just a family property to the grandkids just want property on their own, and there's nothing major to it, and glad to see some type of interest going on in District 1. So other than that, I recommend that we go ahead and approve this.
Any other input from commissioners? Commissioner Neesmith.
Yeah, this is one of those issues that's near and dear to my heart whenever AR gets rezoned or subdivided, and this one is certainly makes sense, and I would support this change.
Any other input on this item? All right, and again, we'll have our final hearing and a vote on March 6th. And moving on to item number 17.
Okay, item 17 is, you're actually going to take 3 votes on this one at your voting meeting in March. 190, 192, and 194 Highland Park Drive, special uses in the RM1 zoning district. These are for 3 halfway houses. For those of you that were here back in August, this, under state law, when we're dealing with halfway houses, we go through a double public hearing process. It has to occur between 6 and 9 months after the first one. So it first came to you, I believe, at a public hearing in September, and then it has now been 6 months, and we're back to fulfill the second public hearing at your March meeting. This is an operation that, if you've had a chance to read the applicant's report, they've given you a lot of information about their operation, and they're being, upfront about it. It is an operation that has been in place for some time in this location. As part of some modified or some changes to their state licensing requirements, it was brought to their attention within the last year that there was local approvals that they had never obtained. And so that is what they're trying to do now, is to obtain those necessary approvals through this process. 3 attached single-family dwellings, all 3 of them would contain, at this point, up to 7 residents. 91521 allows up to 10. They're proposing 7. It is compatible with future land use classification and with any of the special uses if approved. The site plan and report would become binding in terms of the information provided. You see the 3 parcels here. Highland Park Drive. How it is subdivided into the 3 parcels. Existing conditions of the property. No changes at all. This is similar to what you see sometimes with personal care. It is really establishing a use, but there are no proposed changes either required by the new use or proposed by the applicant versus what is there currently. And the Planning Commission recommendations for all 3 were to approve. And as I said earlier, you will, because there are 3 parcels here, 3 separate votes, and you'll have 3 ordinances with those at your March meeting.
Thanks, Brad. Any public input on this item?
Sorry to come up here a third time, y'all. I do remember from that August meeting, I actually took notes on it, so I'm glad this is coming back up. I remember clarification on I'm Jesse Hool at, P.O. Box 445. That halfway houses, in order to qualify as one, as opposed to other recovery-oriented centers or housing, over 50% of the residents therein must be there by court order, as opposed to of their own personal volition. And so I was just curious if there would be room for discussion tonight or somewhere between now and the voting meeting on the relationship between the applicant for this project and our court system, and both in how it's funded and how we're moving people through our court system into these places and what the criteria is. So, thanks.
Any other public input on this item? All right, hearing none, I believe this is in Commissioner Harrod's district.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our suggestion. Or repetition, one or the other. As Brad mentioned, this is basically coming in front of us because of a change in state code. The facility's been operating there for several years. As far as I'm aware, there have not been any issues. I think this is doing a good public service, and I have no problems with this.
Okay. Commissioner Parker.
Thank you. We may have gone through some of these details when we were last voted on this in August, but perhaps the mayor or Commissioner Harrod could speak to the relationship between the property owner and law enforcement. I'm in favor of approving the rezone, but I would also just like to get a clearer picture of like how this place is operating for those in the audience who are listening and asked.
I have no knowledge of that relationship. I don't know if Mr. Griffin has.
I mean, we do not dig in any deeper in terms of any standpoint other than asking the basic questions. Are you going to qualify under the zoning for halfway house? I think there are some letters of reference in the packet along with, from some of the state agencies that
Okay.
have indicated a long working relationship with these, and I would encourage you to reach out to the applicant. I think they would be very happy to talk to you about how their working relationship is with the system as well.
Okay,
I don't know any details.
Nothing to add, Aaron? No? Okay.
Any other comments or questions about this item? All right, we're going to move on then to our last item of the public section of this meeting, item number 18, renaming of the 200 block of South Franklin Street as Jennie L. Mattox Street. And I would like to, Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, I'll speak to it. You can go ahead and say what you were going to say, but I have a
I'm going to
comment.
provide opportunity for public input first.
You do a presentation
Or
real
to do a
quick?
presentation, I
There we
apologize,
go.
Brad. Yeah.
There we go.
We finally got one, y'all. We've been trying to do this for a long time and had some problems landing it. I hope we have landed it this time. The request is to rename the 200 block of South Franklin, which is the only block of South Franklin, to Jennie L. Mattox Street. It is one block between Deering Street and Waddell, out in front of Clark Central High School. Per the request of the Mayor and Commission, you directed us to begin this process 2 or 3 months ago. We had another street. Ended up not being a real street, and so I sent you a memorandum making sure you were okay for this change to occur, and you were. And so we have worked with the applicant and have landed here with this 200 block of what is now South Franklin. To my knowledge and what we can tell from the maps, let me see if I may have it a little better. That's the one block of Franklin Street that is south of Broad. And then, as you know, Franklin picks up north of Reese. I'm not sure any of the other pieces from Reese through to Broad to here or further south were ever built. They show up on some old maps as established rights-of-way that are not improved yet, but it looks like this is the only section that was ever put in place. I mean, for locational reasons, it makes sense not to have a second Franklin Street that is geographically isolated from the rest of what we all know to be Franklin Street, so it makes sense to change here. That is the block you see right out in front of Clark Central there. No address is currently assigned to it, so that impact to existing property owners is not on the table. And there's the street. Most of you will know it. And so that is the proposed street that would be changed. You see there with the sign posted. No affected addresses. We feel like it will help with existing street names for service delivery, and the Planning Commission recommends the change with a unanimous vote to Jennie L. Mattox.
Great. Thanks for the presentation, Brad. Would anyone like to provide public input on this matter? Just give us your name and address.
Takika Platt, 117 East Surrey Court. I have nothing prepared. We were just going to be quiet in the back unless we needed to belabor the point. I've been here several times. And we want to thank you, Allison, for just sticking with us and being on board through it all. You, Mayor, for getting on board so quickly. And I think now this is under your district, Lord, Commissioner Link. So I just appreciate all of your support. We do. Thank you.
Great. Only one more visit.
Okay, yes.
Commissioner Wright.
Yeah, I didn't want to, I wanted to start because the family had reached out to me for a street that was in my district, the first iteration of this. And so we've moved around, and I can understand why she wouldn't be prepared, because the other time she's been here, there wasn't public comment at this stage of it. So it's, the staging has changed as well. But it's well-deserved, and it has been a while to find less an uncomplicated street for, and I thought it was a brilliant move on Ms. Platt's part to go looking for that, and so that it wasn't complex like some of the other options had been. So I look forward to this happening. Wish I could put it on the consent agenda.
Commissioner Thornton.
I am so excited about this happening. I've known Miss Jennie for years, and I love y'all to death. And I think this is how we continue legacy. I see Rick Parker's here and Charlie. They know Miss Jennie. She ran Athens and the Housing Authority, and great woman, great move. I am so glad to be a part of this. This is monumental, and this is how we continue legacy.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'll say a few words. Yeah, I'm really happy to see this. We finally found a street for Ms. Mattox. And it's good to know that this street is going to get a new name, because there is a lot of confusion when, and all the time I spent looking at the Varsity property in that neighborhood. I always wondered, like, Franklin Street cut right through there and picked back up over across Broad. So yeah, having it have its own name and there being a legacy of Ms. Mattox attached to that piece of our public right-of-way, it's good to see this move forward.
Any other commissioner input? Right, this time I would entertain a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of property acquisition or disposal. So moved. All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Neesmith. Second from Commissioner Parker. All in favor? Aye. All right. We've enjoyed having you. Look forward to seeing you next time, everyone.
So take a little break? I think it's